Brian, thanks for joining me. Let's just get this straight right off the top. You found me via this YouTube channel. You saw some of my videos. So before we get into that, was I right or was I wrong in these videos? Are you here to compliment or critique me?
I'm not here to critique one bit. Actually, you're spot on a lot of these things. And as I mentioned to you before we started having this conversation, people have been sending me your videos that live here in Utah, and they're interested in your simplicity of breaking things down. You know how TV works, right? Yeah. 5th grade level, right? You're totally doing that, but with great graphics, and it's easy to understand. So keep up the good work. That's how I found you too.
I'm very 5th grade level. I'll be honest about that. So you cover news in Salt Lake City in the state of Utah. Can I just get a little bit of background? I mean, this is our first time even having a conversation. So maybe you could explain to the audience who you are, what you do, and a little bit of where you've been.
Sure. I work at KUTV2 News, a CBS station. We've been featured on some of your media clips, and I get a kick out of it. I moved to Utah about 5 years ago from Oregon, where I was in small market for about 5 years. I worked in sports there, then into news. I've worked at the Fox TV station here in Utah. Now I work at the CBS station. I'm just a sports fan, right? Like, I grew up in Connecticut. I lost the Whalers as a kid. So the NHL to me is pick your poison, right?
Yeah.
And I think this is an exciting time here in Utah because it's beyond the NHL. It is so much bigger than that at what's happening here. And for the most part, the community is behind it. So I'm a news guy in just kind of that sports fan's body, right? That's how a lot of former sports TV guys are that have transitioned to news. So I take that general interest here, and I love the world of sport. And it's great to be in Utah right now while so much has been going on the last couple of years. It's crazy.
So the one thing about me making videos of a place like Salt Lake City or Utah is that I'm talking about the situation, but I'm not there. I'm not boots on the ground. I'm not from there. I've obviously been there. You are. I'm trying to gauge what's like the tangible hype, interest, conversation about the NHL suddenly coming to Utah. Is it really as a buzz as we think it is?
I think it is. And like I mentioned, I've been here 5 years. I'm not from Utah. I don't have family here. So I'm that outside in a way looking in, but have now about a half a decade experience of just covering the buzz about certain things. For example, the NHL. I mean, I was there, the fan welcoming night, right? I was standing there on the corner of the ice, myself, our sports director doing live TV, Ryan Smith and Ashley Smith walk right by us, their kids. People are yelling at them, wanting to take pictures with them. The place is full. It's so loud in there, you can't even hear through your IFB. The guys walk out. It's like one of the backdrops I screenshotted our coverage from. It looks like I'm at a rock show. Like, it was just insane. There's smoke behind you. I mean, the buzz is legit, Brody. I really think it is because, there's always going to be people in the community that don't think it's a great idea. There's always opposition. Even as our governor said just a couple of weeks ago during his monthly news conference, which he's really good with his time, and he's a big sports fan too. He mentioned, I think there's overwhelming support for that. And I had to think back to it. Is he right? And I went back and listened to just the sample size of public comment from last week in the Salt Lake City Council meeting about the revitalization zone that's proposed by Smith Entertainment Group. 70 people wanted to speak up. Most of those people had an issue with the Abravanel Hall, which is not a city issue, but it's a county issue. It's a county building, not a city council issue, but they still wanted to say their piece. At the end of the day, the majority of the people, I'd say maybe 60 to 70%, really still thought it was a great idea. And that's just pulling from the sample size of public comment, which is where you get the rah-rah opposition normally.
So to your point, there's two things going on. There's, will this team and will NHL be supported in Utah to a proper degree? And then there's also the whole redevelopment issue, right? Then that's a question mark. To Abravanel Hall, I didn't know anything about it. Now I'm understanding why that's a controversy. Let's first dive into the will the hockey team do well in Salt Lake City part. Now, I think it will. So I want to establish that, but I also want to see the other side of it. There is some criticism that would say, wait a second, Salt Lake City has had a minor league hockey team with different names and leagues and affiliations since 1981, and they've always drawn 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,000 fans. Again, it's not the NHL. What is your thought about how all of a sudden Salt Lake City can go from not necessarily supporting its minor league team to going full on for the NHL? Is the market size big enough? Is the desire big enough? I think it is, but I don't know what you would think about that criticism.
When you get the biggest brand in town moving in with all the hype and the financial backing, I think it gets instant backing from the community. And we've already seen it just in that free event where they literally offered you a hot dog and a soda to come in, and that's how it was. And it's sold out.
Free food.
Sold out. Free food, a sellout by capacity standards in 20 minutes? Like, it was insane.
Yeah.
And I think the honeymoon phase will be semi-permanent. It's hard to look down the road 5-10 years from now and see if this will be in the crystal ball. Does it survive? I think it does because of the ownership. You want an ownership that is liquid, right? And has serious capital. Ryan Smith and Ashley Smith have that, and he's developed that through his business ethic with developing Qualtrics, which he sold off, and now he's a billionaire, right? If not multi.
8 billionaire, I think.
Right. And yes, there's a lot of billions in there. And a lot of that is being poured in individually, despite the tax conversation with what happens with the citizens here in Salt Lake City for that 30-year time frame, for that 0.5% sales tax, which is basically not a large amount when you look at it in that spectrum, but it raises the sales tax from 775 to 825 for as long as that expands. I do think the buzz is legit, though, and I think it'll hold on. If you look at the Utah Grizzlies, they play at the Maverick Center. They hosted the Olympic events there back in 2002. They've had some great concerts there over the years. Been there for that, been there for hockey. It's an older venue that also needs a little assistance. It's not in Salt Lake City. It's on the west side of the city, in West Valley City, its own suburb. Not hard to get to by any means, but the Grizzlies, in terms of games that I've been to, haven't sold out. And then lately, towards the tail end of their season, they've had more people show up. Obviously, with that buzz of hockey, there are still diehard minor league hockey fans out there. But this is this is the cream of the crop, right? Like, this is the league that the hockey players want to be in from when they start playing and skating as a kid. The goal is the NHL. The goal is maybe an Olympic team, right? I mean, it doesn't get much bigger than that.
Yeah.
And now they're moving into town so fast,
and
it's happening in just a couple months.
So beyond that, beyond support of the team, to your point earlier about the development project in downtown, now, at the end of February, the state of Utah approved $1.8 billion in 2 different ways for Major League Baseball. We'll talk about the $900 million for the State Fair Park district in just a second, but $900 million to either go towards fixing up Delta Center or building a new downtown arena. It turns out, seems like the Smith Group was kind of not pushed, but led into the direction of, hey, fix up the Delta Center and make a district around that. So to me, I thought it was all said and done. Here's the $900 million that the state and the public is going to give to this. It sounds like the Smith Group, they came out with a proposal saying, okay, we'll take that $900. We also want some more breaks. We want some exemptions. We want to build high rises. We want to redo this, but we kind of want free reign on it as well. Is that where the controversy comes in? Because as far as I understand, the $900 million from the legislative session, that's pretty much said and done, right?
Yeah, and those were already taken care of, signed by the governor, right? Like, that's already moving through. That goes to his desk. He signs it. The state legislature does their thing. There was so much focus in sport. It was really amazing how much focus in sport development and community was falling in the hands of elected officials here in Utah this year, which a lot of them are sports fans, by the way. And sport is big here, despite however you view sports from an outside lens in Utah. To be here, to live it, it's a lot bigger than maybe it is on that national level. And what gets a nationally broadcast team, a game, right? You need good players to normally have that happen. And that's another topic for the Jazz at another time. When you look at the current situation with what needs to take place, next week, there's another public comment hearing about the sales tax. And then the city council has to work on that agreement, sign that agreement, move it to the state level. There's a state revitalization zone sort of committee by September 1st. So the hockey stuff is going to happen regardless. As I see it, the Delta Center renovation to get more seats at a better viewpoint for the game of hockey is also going to happen. Just going to take some time. This whole, how do we build it around the Delta Center, that's still kind of here, right?
Right.
Hockey's still happening. Delta Center change is still happening. Right. It's what happens outside of those walls involving the sales tax, involving the citizens, involving this culture, convention, arts area that is much bigger than just sports, right? Much bigger than just hockey. That is still technically on the table right now. It's still being discussed. Nothing has been set in stone yet. Are
people a little bit on edge about the state reserving $1.8 billion all of a sudden for professional sports. And to your point earlier, yeah, there are people and politicians out there who are sports fans, but right now across the country, there's kind of a movement of public entities saying we're not going to do this anymore and give sports teams every single thing that they want. How are Utahns feeling about that?
Yeah, I think it depends on who you ask. I mean, some of the coverage you've seen is literally man on street sound for some of the news pieces that are out there. And some of that's been our coverage, right? I mean, it's just how it is. You go out and try to get this random perspective on where do you fall in line with this. I think any given day, if you walked right outside of our building here on Main Street in downtown Salt Lake City, you would hear, oh, I love the idea. I'm ready for this. Or no, we're just putting more money in a billionaire's pocket, right? For them to grow and our city, in theory to grow. There were some really good moments in that public comment session where people were saying, this is bigger than moving the money here. This puts our city on a place that's desirable to come. Maybe changes that outlook of what Salt Lake City looks like for somebody who's never been here. Maybe is another reason to come downtown, spend money, focus on tourism. It's just a whole nother reason to grow Salt Lake City, as if we need to anyway, by the way, because this state is just now expanding at a rate that nobody can keep up with.
Yeah.
When you look at the housing market and other things. I'm not trying to tell you that in California, but think about the bigger picture here is always to get bigger and better in Salt Lake, do more of this, build, what was the term they used from Smith Entertainment Group? Break down walls, not build more with this development. And I think there is a little bit more support for this than not. Again, I'd be interested to see how the public turns up again next week, because this lasted like 2.5 hours last week. I mean, they had to move it to another council meeting because there's a lot of opinions on this. And a lot of it's coming from members of the religious community here, right? Like there's the Japantown area that falls in the revitalization zone. There's a Buddhist temple there. I mean, it's much bigger than just a Brabino Hall, the Delta Center, and Smith Entertainment Group. I mean, this involves generations of families here, development, and what does that look like in the future in downtown Salt Lake? This is an area that recently had the NBA All-Star Game, right? This is an area that has the National Women's Soccer League coming back. This is an area that has in the state the PGA Tour coming back for the first time in 60 years. This is an area that is taking their AAA minor league baseball team, moving them out of downtown Salt Lake City. Great new renderings this week, by the way. Moving them to a suburb about 25 minutes outside of downtown to this brand new ballpark that is already being constructed as you and I talk.
Yeah.
There is so much movement in sport here where you hope there's some public interest behind it. I would imagine there is.
So it sounds like if the downtown thing happens, it's just not going to happen right away because there's a lot to sort out, right? Not to say it will or it won't happen, but there's a lot to get through because all of this is so new. There's a lot to figure out quickly here, and that's why it just might take some time. Simple as that?
I think it's as simple as that. And I believe at the end of the day, this will happen because of the support for it. But like anything else, there's a formal governmental process that needs to take place. The public need to have their say, even if it's just for 3 minutes and you get your time cut. Like that's a part of the democracy process here in the country. And that's just what we do. So that process needs to play out. And then we'll see how long it takes for them to, dot the I's and cross the T's here and move forward.
The Utah Yeti. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's probably the front runner, right? Like thanks to Pat McAfee for cold calling Ryan Smith earlier this week. We all can confirm the obvious suspicion that
down to
Yeti
4, is that right?
The Final Four. Final Four, which he mentioned in the call, was Mammoth and Yeti. The names are wacky, right? Like they're just interesting. And at the end of the day, I'm sitting here talking to you at the end of May. I guarantee Smith Entertainment Group already knows what name they're going with, right? Like this is to get the public involved. Right. This is to get the excitement going.
Promote Qualtrics.
The excitement here.
Promote Qualtrics a little bit.
Qualtrics is doing the survey. This is all part of the business. At the end of the day, it is a good way to get people excited about the NHL. Yeah. I heard another take on this the other day about it's partially a financial grab, right? Because the first year is going to be Utah NHL, which we know that. I've known that for a while from Smith Entertainment Group, that just going to be Utah on the jersey. Right. And they're going to sell that memorabilia. They're going to sell that gear. You can't even buy a Utah NHL shirt right now. Those were gone the first night.
Yeah. No, it's going to be a collector's edition, too, because if they only wear Utah for 1 year, imagine having that sweater and wearing that for the next decade. It's going to be worth so much. Last question on the whole NHL to Utah thing here. Ryan and Ashley Smith, still relatively new to the game. Have they earned the citizens' trust in the state of Utah in terms of not only owning the Jazz and taking that over, but now doing some big projects with the NHL in downtown?
I think overwhelmingly, without saying 100%
Sure.
certain, I think there's obviously that backing because Ryan and Ashley have done so much. Like I alluded to, they brought the NHL, the NBA All-Star Weekend here.
Yeah.
It's something that probably would have never happened. By the way, the Miller Group is alive and well because they're involved with Big League Utah, bringing Major League Baseball here, building the AAA stadium. They own the Bees.
Yep.
So they're still heavily involved in a lot of things. But at the end of the day, when you're asked about Ryan and Ashley Smith, how could you not be behind somebody that had this take place in a matter of 6 weeks with the NHL?
I know.
I mean, Gary Bettman said that. He goes, Ryan reached out years ago.
Right.
We had some conversations. We weren't ready to move forward with an expansion or a relocation. But then when I knocked on Ryan's door and said, we need your help to put out the fire, that is whatever's happening in Arizona with Alex Murillo and company, apparently that happened so quick that somebody only like perhaps Ryan and Ashley Smith and their partners and other investors perhaps could do. I mean, I thought it was months to realize it's a matter of weeks, Brody. That's insane.
Well,
that is insanely fast.
Let me go back on the timeline for a second. Late February, like the last couple days of February, 2 pairs of $900 million were set aside for baseball and for the NHL. And Gary Bettman said he went with Bill Daley down to Arizona the first week of March. So we're talking about a week where Bettman said, Utah's got $900 million for the NHL, huh? I'm just saying, I think in retrospect, the wheels in motion were because of that legislative session. Not a lot of people talk about that, but I think it was always an idea, but I think that pushed him to go down there and talk to the Coyotes ownership. So on that note, let me pivot here because the other $900 million is set aside if a Major League Baseball team comes to the state of Utah. Now, that's the Larry H. Miller Group, and to your point, they're all about Daybreak and building that new stadium and that development for the Bees and obviously the community down there. But the stadium that they would build would be right next to the Fair Park, so what, between downtown and the airport, is that correct?
It is directly between the airport and downtown. It's I-15 is kind of your divider, right?
Yeah.
Major interstate, east side, downtown Salt Lake City, Avenues area, state capitol, pushing up towards the hillside. West side is a street called North Temple, as you can imagine. Use the temple as a reference.
Sure.
Come all the way to the airport. It's right along in line with the airport. There's public transportation there already with a light rail, and it goes through a side of town that's historically been a little tough for businesses to survive. There's the Utah State Fair Park there, which is still kind of a cool spot. They do music festivals and such there and other community events. The land it's going to be on, which they coined it the Power District, is owned by Rocky Mountain Power, which of course is a power supplier for electricity here in Utah. So there's all this partnership going on, and they broke ground on that with shovels in the ground for a good photo op. Gosh, feels like more than a year ago now. The difference between that 900 and the 900 we're talking about here is that $900 is purely that area that's going to be spent and then reinvested into this area, comparison to that sales tax situation for all of Salt Lake City's residents.
Right.
On the other side. It's a different configuration, but the same amount of money for what the legislature did.
But
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The $900 million, though, it's sitting there right now. Just like it was sitting there when the NHL said, we've got the Coyotes, we've got money over here in Utah. Is this kind of a leverage situation for Salt Lake City? And I'm wondering, considering there are teams out there like the Oakland, soon to be Sacramento version of the A's, or the Tampa Bay Rays, who are a little bit unsettled. The Chicago White Sox are apparently a little bit unsettled. Is this Utah's plan or strategy to just kind of be ready? And you can say you want an expansion team like the Smith Group did back in the day, but you're willing to take, because that site is apparently shovel ready, you're willing to take an existing team if that's also the case. Does this seem like history could repeat itself for Utah?
Yes, absolutely. I think they'll take whatever they can get, whether it is expansion, relocation, hybrid deal a la NHL, right? Like they have the building blocks in play right now with money, financial investment, obviously from the legislature, the Larry H. Miller Group, which has already committed, what was the number, $3 billion or whatever their own number was, committed to this Fair Park redevelopment, which they want to do a river walk and all these things around the ballpark, which those renderings look cool too, because renderings are made to look cool. It's the whole point. If you're a sports fan, you go, oh, new shiny object. And I think that this is still their way of saying, hey, Rob Manfred, hey, we're here. We've got this plot of land, a stone's throw from downtown, a stone's throw from, by the way, virtually a brand new airport, which is a major Delta hub here in the Intermountain West, that has been under construction, has grown so much, even the last 5 years that I've been here. It's easy to get to Salt Lake. It's not hard, especially from California. There's every LA airport has direct flights multiple times a day here. So if you think about the accessibility to where that plot is, to public transportation, the airport, downtown, new hotels that have gone up in the area around the Delta Center, brand new Hyatt downtown in the last year or two. I mean, it's a shovel-ready place. And I think that's all part of the big plan.
So going back to February, March, when I saw those billboards pop up from the Larry H. Miller Group saying that Utah wants the A's.
Yeah.
Now, I need you to finish that sentence for me. Utah wanted the A's. Utah still wants the A's. Utah wants the A's temporarily until they go to Las Vegas. Utah wants the A's permanently. What exactly do you think that meant?
Utah wants the idea of the A's, perhaps.
But not the actual A's?
I don't know. I don't know if, well, that was based on temporary, right? The whole goal was to,
it was a different time.
We've got this new enticing ballpark we're building. Yeah, it doesn't have major league capacity, but it has capacity. It's new. It's cool. Why wouldn't you want to play Major League Baseball, regardless of the capacity, in this brand new stadium that can still probably pack the place? I think that was the pitch. I don't think it was, hey, we want Major League Baseball here forever. We also want the A's. I don't think that's the case, which we now know is not going to happen unless something dramatically changes, which I
well, you never know. It's a bridge. Sacramento is a bridge from Oakland to what they're planning.
Good for Sacktown, by the way. That should be great. Good for them.
I got to tell you, from the Northern California perspective, there are a lot of dynamics going on surrounding that. That's probably the best way to put it. I guess the point is it's a bridge. It's kind of like when the Arizona Coyotes went from a permanent NHL caliber arena in Glendale to the temporary spot in Tempe. But they didn't have the next spot lined up. And it turns out, as of today, they still don't have the next spot lined up. And they ran out of time with the league. I'm just saying that Sacramento is the next thing, but the bridge is not fully built out yet, at least right now, to Las Vegas. And that kind of just brings my curiosity around this. I think Utah still is keeping a very close eye on all this. That's probably the best way to put it. Yeah.
I think they, keeping the conversation and dialogue open seems like an obvious scenario. Yeah. We don't necessarily need this one of the two potential coveted spots of expansion for Major League Baseball, where there's another place that needs a good home. It's like, being the foster parent, right? Like we'll take them because we should, and it's the right thing to do if we're in this situation.
Yeah.
And I think that makes total sense, because whether it's the A's or not, they still just want Major League Baseball here. Did they want, it's a different dynamic than the NHL, because we wanted the NHL here years ago, but there was no financial backing. There was no major promise. There was no grassroots, or whatever you want to call it, movement to make that happen. Very different Major League Baseball than NHL. Just kind of funny that the NHL happened so much quicker because of the situation and how the cards were drawn compared to Major League Baseball, which, by the way, still could never happen. I lived in Oregon when the Portland Diamond Project began.
Oh, yeah.
It originated. I lived in Medford, Southern Oregon, basically a forgotten city against the true Northern California. And it was interesting because Dale Murphy was a part of the Portland Diamond Project. Dale Murphy lives in Utah. Dale Murphy's a part of the Utah push.
That's right. Yeah.
So it's interesting to see how that changed over time. Maybe Portland is still a target, city with character, city with the Portland Pickles, whereas the Major League Baseball conversation is much newer here in Utah, but perhaps the pitch is that much more compelling, Brody, because of the financial interest, because of the long-term, family dynamic of ownership from the state's most successful sports franchise known as the Utah Jazz with the Miller Group. I think if you're the MLB and you're looking at Utah, you go, not a bad fit. How do we do it?
Well, look how the Jazz got to Utah. I mean, Jazz is from New Orleans. I mean, like actual Jazz and the Jazz. I'm going to call them the Coyotes. Get it? Coyotes? Anyway, never mind. They're from Arizona. Yeah, I know. It's bad. From Arizona. And I guess how maybe Utah could import a baseball team might be the same way by taking it from somewhere else. And that brings me to the very last thing here. And I appreciate this has been such a good conversation. I think the state of Utah, if I'm correct, population 3 million, something like that. Higher? 4 million? 5 million? Okay.
And it's and change as of last census, right?
And it's
constantly growing.
And it's growing. So like let's make that obvious. I only say this in a sense of, to your point earlier, all of this is happening so quick and the Jazz have done so well for so long. Now you're throwing in, hey, competition in the winter with the NHL, competition in the summer with Major League Baseball, hypothetically and potentially. Is there any worry that Utah would be growing just a little bit too fast for maybe its own rate of growth?
Well, I mean, it already is when you look at the housing market. But when you look at sports, there was that concern. And actually, going back to where I work at a local news station, we have done coverage on this. Is there an oversaturation or overcapacity of sport in Utah, even as we stand today with the NHL and no Major League Baseball? Think of this, surprising amount of Division I athletics from St. George, Utah, with Utah Tech, Southern Utah University, going north, BYU, Utah Valley University, University of Utah, Weber State, USU. I just went up straight up I-15 there. Those are all Division I programs.
Yeah.
Those have their own fans. And we're not even talking about professional. We're talking about just a saturation of high-level sports that are already here, which is interesting when you look at it, because I always think of a place like Vegas, which has just ballooned in professional sport interest and success, mind you, with that moving there. I just think it's a different animal here in Utah than just one city of Vegas versus what we're doing here in this state, because of the fact that it's one giant state spread out. But the idea is still, we love sport.
Yeah.
We want more. And I'm not saying everybody feels that way. I'm saying that's the message and the push. Could it be oversaturated as we sit here right now, just with the NHL? Absolutely. But there's a surprising amount of money here too.
Yeah.
And money has its way of making a lot of influential changes, as you know, especially in the world of sport. Utah, I don't know if a place has grown like Utah in the last decade, not in just the amount of people, but in the amount of sport-related changes, whether it be a level up from BYU, University of Utah, whether it be let's bring the Olympics back here, by the way, in a decade, and how does the downtown area look now in 2024 compared to where we welcome the rest of the world for the Winter Games, where we're going to do Big Air, the 2018 newest sport in the Winter Olympics, in downtown Salt Lake City. How is that revitalization zone going to look as we have the world viewing Utah? So it's more than just our professional franchises probably getting the Olympics back in about a decade here. And by the way, that's been a long conversation. That's been going on forever now.
We kind of failed to touch on that earlier, to be honest with you. All things considered, it's more than
that's
just
my
pro sports.
Fault, Brody.
No,
that's my fault.
But I mean, that's a whole nother twist too, right? Like, you know, all of the upgrades and things going on here, the Olympics play a huge part of that. And while you're at it, why not fix up the building for the Jazz and the NHL team and have all your venues top notch as they should be?
By the way, Winter Olympics, when you think of hockey, what season do you think of, right? I mean, these mountains are on top of you here in Salt Lake.
Sure.
It's kind of
I know about the Wasatch. I know the Wasatch Front. I'm big on that now. See, I'm learning.
When's the last time you were here? Turning the question on you.
A couple of years ago, actually. Yeah, no, it's been a while. So I look, I see all the photos and it reminds me of how beautiful it is in the setting. And I'm just curious about all this. Honestly, I'm more curious than I am favoring it or going against it.
Sure.
I find all of this stuff interesting and how a market can grow like this. And you're there, and that's why I wanted to reach out to you. And Brian, I appreciate our conversation. I wish you wouldn't have outdressed me next time, and I hope there is next time. Don't wear a suit, please. I know you're at work right now, but
let me do what I did to
loosen it up.
Goaltender Connor Ingram when I spoke with him about the Masterton Trophy. He's like, "You're overdressed," and he's like, "Give me 2 buttons." So I gave him
2 buttons.
I gave him the hockey.
You're looking more Vegas than Salt Lake City right now, I gotta say.
It's apparently the professional hockey formal dress.
Tell your colleagues that
from our goaltender.
I appreciate their work and all this coverage, and I kind of use it sometimes to showcase what's really going on. So I appreciate them for doing the groundwork and the hard work. And Brian, let's keep in touch.
Thanks for having me.